Mason Zeller didn't expect his day to begin with spilled apple juice, a meltdown over missing socks, and a train ride that would change his entire life. "Zoe, come on, baby, we're gonna miss it." Mason bent down to zip up his 5-year-old daughter's backpack, brushing her curls behind her ear as she clutched her stuffed panda to her chest. She looked up at him with wide eyes. "But Daddy, you forgot my snack." He sighed, lifting her into his arms as he jogged toward the subway entrance. "We'll grab something at the corner store, I promise." He was always promising her they'd be okay, promising himself he could hold everything together. He'd been juggling 3 jobs since his ex walked out 2 years ago, and they were barely scraping by. Zoe was his entire world. But lately, even the world felt too heavy to carry. They made it onto the train just as the doors slid shut. Mason stood, holding onto the rail with one hand, balancing Zoe in the other. That's when it happened. A woman 2 seats away suddenly swayed forward, her designer bag slipping from her lap as her body collapsed to the floor. "Daddy," Zoe gasped, clutching his shirt. Mason didn't think. He moved fast. Hey, someone call for help," he shouted, kneeling beside the woman. Her skin was pale, her breathing was shallow. He lowered his voice. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Her lips moved, but no sound came out. She wore a navy suit that looked like money, and her heels probably cost more than his rent. But none of that mattered now. "Zoe, stay right there," he said firmly to his daughter, who nodded and clutched the pole with both hands. He gently lifted the woman's head onto his lap, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "You're okay, just breathe, help's coming." The train stopped and paramedics rushed in. Mason backed away as they lifted her onto a stretcher. "Wait," he said, grabbing her bag from the floor. "This is hers." The woman's eyes fluttered open for half a second, their gazes locked. Her lips barely moved, but he heard it. "Thank you." He hadn't even gotten her name. 3 days later, Mason was back at the diner for his night shift. Zoe was with Miss Lillian, the older woman down the hall who babysat when he worked late. He was wiping down tables when someone walked in, heels clicking, perfume lingering, confidence radiating. He looked up and froze. It was her, the woman from the train. She looked different now, alert, poised, powerful. Her hair was pulled into a sleek ponytail and her tailored blazer hugged her curves perfectly. "You," she said, walking straight up to him. "Me?" he asked, stunned. "You saved my life," he blinked. "You were, on the train." She smiled, soft but sure. "I was unconscious. But I remember your voice and your daughter, Zoe, right?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I'm Mason, Kennedy," she said, offering her hand. Kennedy Thorne. Her grip was strong, her eyes even stronger, and something about the way she looked at him made his heart stutter. "I wanted to thank you." "Properly?" "You don't have to, I want to," she interrupted. "You stayed with me, you didn't walk away, that means something." He cleared his throat. "Anyone would have done the same." "No, they wouldn't," she said simply. "Trust me, I know people." He didn't know what to say to that. Kennedy glanced around the empty diner. "Is your manager here?" "Yeah, but why?" "Because I want to steal you for dinner if you're available." He blinked again. "You want to? Take me out. Unless you're afraid of a woman buying you steak." He laughed, shaking his head. "I mean, no. Just not used to this." Kennedy tilted her head. "Let me thank you, one dinner, no pressure." He looked toward the back, then at her. "Give me 5 minutes." He didn't know how it happened, but 10 minutes later he was in the backseat of a black town car, sitting next to a woman who looked like she stepped off the cover of a business magazine. The driver pulled up to a restaurant he'd only seen in movies. "You sure they let guys like me in here?" he half-joked. Kennedy smiled. "They'll let you in with me." Inside, chandeliers sparkled above their heads. Waiters wore white gloves. Mason felt like he'd walked into another world. Kennedy ordered a bottle of wine and filet mignon like she did it every night. Mason just ordered what she did, too stunned to process the menu. "You're really not used to this, are you?" she asked after the first course arrived. "I'm used to boxed mac and cheese," he said honestly. She laughed, and it wasn't fake. It was real, warm. "I like that about you." He looked at her, surprised. "What do you mean, you're honest? You don't pretend. Everyone I deal with pretends." He studied her. "What do you do?" She sipped her wine. "I'm the CEO of Thorne Tech." His mouth fell open. "Wait, you're the Kennedy Thorne?" She gave a small nod. "You run the company that my phone's made by your company." That's me, she said. He leaned back. So you're basically a billionaire. Technically, yes. He let out a low whistle. Wow, Kennedy tilted her head. Does that change how you feel about me? I don't even know how I feel about you yet, he replied honestly. But I know you're not what I expected, she smiled again. Good. They talked for 2 hours about life, about Zoe. About her childhood in Boston and his dreams of opening a small auto shop one day. She laughed at his stories. He listened when she got quiet, and when they stepped out of the restaurant, the city lights glowing around them, she turned to him. I meant what I said. You saved me. He looked at her. I didn't do anything special. You were kind. You stayed. You didn't look at me like a problem. You looked at me like a person. He didn't speak. He just looked at her, and then she leaned in and kissed him, soft, slow, like it was the most natural thing in the world. When she pulled back, her voice was a whisper. That wasn't a thank you. Mason's heart pounded. What was it then? A beginning. Mason couldn't stop thinking about the kiss. It had only been 2 days, but it lived in his mind like a secret he hadn't figured out how to live with yet. He hadn't told anyone about the dinner, not Miss Lillian, not his coworkers, not even Zoe, who would have asked 100 questions about who Kennedy was, and why Daddy had that look in his eye. He didn't know what to make of it. Maybe it meant something. Maybe it didn't. People like her probably kissed people like him when they were feeling reckless or grateful, not because they were looking for something real. Still, when the knock came at the door just after noon, and he opened it to find Kennedy standing there with a paper bag in her hands and a cautious smile on her face, he forgot how to breathe. I brought lunch, she said, lifting the bag a little. He blinked. You came here. I figured it was time I met the girl who owns your heart. Zoe was on the couch, crayons scattered around her like a halo, watching a cartoon with one sock on and peanut butter on her cheek. When she noticed Kennedy, she tilted her head. Are you the lady that got sick? Kennedy crouched down, her voice gentle. I am. You saved me and didn't even know it. Zoe studied her for a moment. You smell like flowers. Kennedy laughed under her breath. I'll take that as a compliment. Mason stepped aside, still trying to understand how his tiny apartment had just become the setting for something that felt like it belonged in another universe. They ate sandwiches on paper plates, seated at the wobbly fold-out table he'd found at a yard sale last year. Kennedy didn't seem to notice when her chair squeaked, or that Zoe's juice sloshed dangerously close to her silk blouse. She asked Zoe about her favorite animals and let her braid a loose section of her hair with sticky fingers. After lunch, Mason walked her to the hallway. You didn't have to do all that, he said, keeping his voice low. I wanted to. He leaned a shoulder against the wall. You're not exactly blending in. She glanced down at her heels. Was it the shoes? More like the whole vibe. Kennedy crossed her arms. You think it's a bad idea, don't you, you showing up like this? He exhaled. It doesn't make sense. Because I'm not supposed to care. Because people like you don't usually care this long. Kennedy's expression didn't waver. I'm not people. No, he said quietly. You're not. She stepped closer. I came because I wanted to. You didn't ask for anything. You didn't expect anything. That matters. He looked at her, trying to find the catch, the moment where this would all unravel. I don't have much to offer, he said finally. I'm not asking for anything but time. He nodded slowly. Okay, Kennedy touched his arm. I have a board meeting in an hour, but I'll call. No pressure. After she left, Mason stood in the hallway for a long time, staring at the spot where she'd just been. Something in his chest felt different now. Not lighter exactly, but less alone. That night, after Zoe was asleep, his phone buzzed. Can you come by Thorne Tech tomorrow? Kennedy asked. I want to show you something. The next day, he took the early train into Midtown, dressed in his cleanest jeans and a flannel shirt without stains. He felt out of place the second he walked into the building. The lobby was marble and chrome, filled with people who looked like they were born with briefcases in their hands. At the front desk, the receptionist barely looked up. Can I help you? I'm here to see Kennedy Thorne. The woman's posture changed immediately. Of course. She asked me to escort you up personally. When the elevator doors opened, Kennedy was waiting. You made it, she said, smiling. I almost turned around at least 3 times. I'm glad you didn't. She gestured for him to follow. Come on. She led him through a maze of glass offices and sleek conference rooms until they reached a massive corner suite. The view of the city was staggering, but Mason barely noticed. The room was filled with drawings, models, and designs, some high-tech, others simple sketches. "I wanted you to see what I'm working on." He raised an eyebrow. "Why me?" "Because I think you'll understand it." She walked to a table and picked up a folder. "I've been developing a line of affordable tech tablets, phones, learning devices that don't sacrifice quality but cost a fraction of what's on the market. For families like yours, like mine used to be." He looked through the pages. "These prices, they're actually doable." "That's the point." "But the board isn't convinced. They want the margins, I want the impact." "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you remind me why it matters. You're the reason I'm pushing so hard." Mason stared at her, stunned. "You're serious?" Kennedy nodded. "Dead serious." He set the folder down. "You're going to get a lot of pushback." "I already am." "Then why keep pushing?" She met his eyes. "Because you stayed with me when I was falling apart. Now I get to fight for something that matters." He didn't know what to say to that, so he didn't say anything. He just looked at her, this woman who was supposed to be untouchable, and realized she was more grounded than anyone he'd ever met. Before he left, Kennedy walked him back down to the lobby. "I'm not expecting anything from you," she said quietly. "I just wanted you to know where my heart is." He hesitated, then reached for her hand. "I think I'm starting to figure that out." As he stepped outside, the wind sharp against his face, he smiled for the first time in weeks. He didn't know what would happen next. But for the first time in years, he wanted to find out. Zoe was asleep in the back seat, her head tilted toward the window, clutching the stuffed bear Kennedy had handed her hours earlier. Mason adjusted the rearview mirror, watching her tiny chest rise and fall, then turned his attention back to the road. His grip on the wheel tightened as the GPS led him up a winding hill lined with old growth trees and wrought iron gates. "This is not where I thought we were going," he said carefully, glancing at Kennedy in the passenger seat. "I didn't want to tell you until we got closer," she replied, folding her hands in her lap. "I wasn't sure if you'd come if I did." "And where exactly is here?" She looked out the window as they passed a stone sign flanked by manicured hedges. "My family's estate, technically my father's." Mason exhaled. "You said he wasn't around," her mouth pressed into a line. "He's not." "But the house is." He glanced at her. "And you brought me here, why?" "Because I want you to see where I come from, all of it." The car curved around a long driveway, revealing a pale stone mansion with ivy crawling up the sides and a fountain at the center of a circular drive. It looked like something out of a European film, elegant, cold, and intimidating. Mason parked near the steps. "You grew up here, until I was 16, then I left and never came back." He looked at her, waiting. "My father was a man who liked control. Everything had to be precise, perfect. That included me." She stepped out of the car, her heels crunching on the gravel, and motioned for him to follow. He carefully lifted Zoe from the back seat, her head resting on his shoulder, and trailed behind Kennedy up the steps and through a massive oak door. The interior was silent and cavernous. Marble floors stretched beneath vaulted ceilings. Paintings lined the walls, portraits of solemn-looking ancestors dressed in outdated finery. Kennedy stopped in the center of the foyer. This house was never warm, even with the fireplaces lit. "Why bring us here?" Mason asked, lowering Zoe onto a chaise in the sitting area and covering her with her jacket. She walked ahead, her voice echoing slightly. "Because it's the one place I never imagined sharing with anyone. And I wanted you to see that." He followed her into a sunroom filled with dust-covered books and an old grand piano. "I was supposed to take over the family trust, marry someone with a pedigree, host charity galas, smile on command." She turned to face him. "Instead, I left with student loans and a business plan. My father called it betrayal." Mason leaned against the doorframe. "Sounds like he didn't know what to do with someone who had her own mind." "He didn't. That's why I buried this place, until now." He stepped forward. "So why dig it up?" "Because I can't keep asking you to trust me if I'm hiding parts of myself." He looked at her, really looked. Her blouse was creased from the seatbelt, her lipstick faintly worn from hours on the road. She didn't look like a CEO or a woman who'd grown up in a palace. She looked like someone on the edge of something terrifying and real. "I didn't ask for everything," he said quietly. "I just wanted honesty. Kennedy crossed to the piano, brushing her fingers over the keys without pressing them. I used to play here, late at night when I couldn't sleep. My mother would sit in that chair, she pointed to a velvet armchair beside the window, and hum along. He stepped beside her. She's gone, cancer, 10 years ago. I'm sorry. She was the reason I survived this place. She taught me how to leave without guilt. Mason watched her eyes go distant. He didn't reach for her. He knew better than to touch something fragile too soon. Instead, he asked, "What do you want from me, Kennedy?" She turned to him slowly. "A chance. For what? For this to be more than a moment," he hesitated. "I'm not the kind of man who fits into this world." "Neither am I," she said. He shook his head. "You're building empires. I'm trying to keep the lights on." She stepped closer. "You're raising a daughter with more love than most men know how to give. That's more valuable than anything I've ever built." He didn't answer right away. "Let me take you somewhere," she said. "Just for the weekend. You, me, and Zoe. No pressure, no expectations." He furrowed his brow. "Where?" She smiled, but it didn't feel rehearsed. "You'll see." 2 days later, Mason stood on the tarmac of a private airfield, staring at the sleek white jet parked in front of him. Zoe clutched his hand, her eyes wide. "Is that a spaceship?" she asked. Kennedy knelt beside her. "It's a plane." "A really fast one," Zoe gasped. "Are we going to the moon?" "Close," Kennedy said with a wink. They boarded the plane, Zoe bouncing in her seat with excitement as Mason settled beside her, still unsure how any of this was real. Hours later, they landed on an island surrounded by turquoise water. A villa waited at the edge of the beach, its white walls glowing in the sun. A private chef greeted them with fresh mango juice and warm coconut bread. Mason watched Zoe run toward the shoreline, her laughter carried by the wind. Kennedy stood beside him, barefoot now, her heels abandoned somewhere near the deck. "You didn't have to do this," he said. "I know," she replied. He turned toward her. "I'm not used to people doing things just because they want to." She looked at him carefully. "Then it's time someone did." That night, after Zoe fell asleep in a canopy bed with mosquito netting and a teddy bear tucked under her arm, Mason stepped out onto the deck. Kennedy was already there, her hair damp from the ocean, her dress clinging to her in the breeze. "I keep waiting for the catch," he admitted. "There isn't one." He folded his arms. "It's hard to believe this is real." She stepped closer, her voice low. "It's as real as you let it be." He looked at her, his heart caught somewhere between fear and want. "I'm scared of what happens when this ends." Kennedy touched his face gently. "Then let's not end it." The morning sun spilled across the villa's wooden floors, casting long golden stripes across the woven rugs and driftwood furniture. Mason stood at the edge of the veranda, barefoot, his coffee cooling in his hand as he watched Zoe chase tide pools with a stick and a shell bucket. Behind him, the glass doors slid open with a soft sound. "She's been out there since sunrise," Kennedy said, stepping beside him in an oversized linen shirt that belonged to him now, though he hadn't offered it. "She said the ocean told her secrets," Mason replied, half smiling, eyes still on his daughter. Kennedy wrapped her fingers around the cup he hadn't touched. "You're quiet," he nodded. "Trying to memorize this." She glanced at him. "The view?" "No," he said. "This, you, her, peace." Kennedy leaned against the railing. "It doesn't have to end when we leave." He looked at her then, the weight of something unspoken sitting between them. "But it does, doesn't it? The moment we step back into your world, it changes everything." "I don't want that," she said. "I'm not bringing you back into boardrooms and press releases. I want to build something different." "You already built something," he said. "A company, a legacy." She turned toward him. "Then I'll build something new. With you, if you'll let me." Mason studied her face, and for the first time, he saw the nerves beneath the certainty. The woman who had once introduced herself with unwavering poise was now standing in front of him without armor. "I need to know this isn't a vacation fantasy," he said. "Because I can't give Zoe a dream that disappears when the jet leaves the runway." "I'm not going anywhere," Kennedy said. "I've already made my decision." "What decision?" I stepped down, his brow furrowed. "What?" "I handed over day-to-day operations to the COO. The board's still recovering, but I don't care. I want out of the skyscraper and closer to something real." His voice was quiet. "You did that, because of us." "Because of me," she said. Because I finally figured out what I want, and it's not more money, it's not more power. It's a life that feels alive. He shook his head slowly, stunned. You really mean that? I do, she said. I want to start fresh, not as the CEO, just as Kennedy, and I want you in that life. Zoe came running up the steps, her curls flying. Daddy. I found a crab with one claw. Mason crouched to meet her. Did you make sure he was okay? He waved at me, she said, breathless. Can he come home with us? He glanced at Kennedy, then back at Zoe. We'll see, okay? Zoe darted back toward the water. He rose, the silence stretching between them like a held breath. I don't know how to live in your world. Kennedy reached for his hand. Then let's make a new one, together. Back in the city, things didn't fall apart. They began to fall into place. Mason didn't return to the diner. On Kennedy's suggestion, and after much convincing, he used the savings she quietly deposited into a joint account to open a small repair garage in Brooklyn. His name was on the sign. His tools finally had a permanent home, and Zoe had a corner of the office filled with books and puzzles. Kennedy didn't disappear into obscurity, but she did stay out of the spotlight. She began consulting quietly, choosing only projects that mattered to her. She spent mornings with Mason and afternoons helping Zoe with schoolwork or sitting at the garage, flipping through design sketches while Mason worked under the hood of a car. One evening, after locking up, Mason found her leaning against a workbench, grease-streaked blueprint paper in her hands. I like this version of you, she said, looking up. He wiped his hands on a rag. The mechanic, the man who looks like he belongs exactly where he is. I never thought I'd get here, he admitted. Not like this. She walked to him, slipping the paper onto the desk behind him. Neither did I, he studied her face. You still sure? I've never been more certain. Mason reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, square box her breath caught. I know this looks like something you'd find at a flea market, he said, opening it to reveal a simple, brushed gold band. Because it is, but I want to give you something better later, something I save for, something that's ours. Kennedy's throat worked, but no sound came. I don't know if I can give you a castle or a title or anything that makes headlines, Mason said. But I can give you this, a promise, that I'll show up, that I'll stay, that I'll fight for you even when it's hard. She nodded, tears welling. Yes. Yes, I'll marry you. He slid the ring onto her finger. It didn't sparkle. It didn't need to. Zoe burst in from the back office with a peanut butter mustache. Did I miss it? Kennedy turned to her, kneeling. No, sweet girl, you're exactly on time. Mason scooped Zoe into his arms. You're gonna be in the wedding, you know. Can I wear wings? She asked. You can wear whatever you want, Kennedy said, laughing. They married in a small garden behind the garage under a canopy of string lights and surrounded by the people who mattered. Mason wore a suit Kennedy tailored herself. Zoe dropped flower petals with reckless joy, and Kennedy walked down the aisle barefoot, her eyes never leaving his. There were no news crews, no headlines, no press releases, just a struggling dad who stepped in when he saw someone in need. And a woman who had everything until she realized what she really wanted was something money could never buy. The first storm of spring rolled in the morning. Mason and Kennedy signed the final papers for the new house. Not just a house, a home. A modest craftsman tucked behind a row of dogwoods in a quiet Brooklyn neighborhood where the streetlights glowed soft and slow, and neighbors brought over pie just because they could. The garage was a block away. Zoe's new school was within walking distance. And the house had enough creaky charm to feel lived in, like it had been waiting for them. Kennedy leaned against the kitchen counter, barefoot in jeans, watching rain streak down the windows as Mason flipped through a box of old records he'd found buried in one of the moving crates. You think she's okay? Kennedy asked, glancing toward the hallway. She's been in there for 20 minutes, Mason said. That's either a masterpiece or total destruction. Kennedy set down her mug. I'll check. Zoe was in her room, painted in soft sage green, the walls already covered in stickers and glittery drawings, kneeling on the floor with construction paper spread around her like confetti. She looked up, face streaked with marker. I'm making our family flag. Kennedy crouched beside her. A flag? Yeah, every real team has a flag. It goes over the house so people know who lives here. What's on it? A star, cause your fancy. A wrench, cause daddy fixes stuff. And pancakes, cause I like pancakes. Kennedy laughed. That sounds perfect. Can we hang it outside? We'll find a way. Back in the kitchen, Mason was fitting a vinyl onto the player. When the first notes crackled out, Kennedy paused in the doorway. That's old school Motown, he turned. My mom used to play it when she cleaned. Thought it might make this place feel more like ours. Kennedy stepped into his arms, the music curling between them. We've got a house, a kid, a flag. A pretty strange flag, he said, resting his chin on her head, but it's ours. The rain kept falling, but inside, everything was warm. Later that week, Kennedy pulled Mason aside after Zoe had fallen asleep tangled in her blanket fort. I want to talk to you about something, she said, leading him out to the porch. Is this the part where you tell me something crazy like you bought another island? He teased. She rolled her eyes. No, not crazy, just big, he waited, watching her face. I've been asked to join a nonprofit board, she said. One that supports single parents starting small businesses. They want me to help restructure their funding model and offer mentorship. It's not flashy and there's no paycheck, but it feels right, he blinked. That's incredible. I didn't say yes yet. I wanted to make sure it wouldn't take away from us. Mason sat beside her, pulling her hand into his. You're allowed to have your own things, Kennedy. I love you because you care. Don't stop that now, she looked at him. You're sure? I'll never hold you back from doing something that matters to you, just like you wouldn't hold me back. She exhaled, shoulders relaxing. Then I'll say yes. In the weeks that followed, their new rhythm took shape. Mornings were loud with cereal spills and missing shoes. Kennedy took meetings from the spare room turned office, her feet tucked under her on the chair, her voice soft but firm. Mason kept the garage running, hiring 2 new mechanics and offering discounted service to parents referred through the nonprofit. Zoe flourished drawing maps of imaginary cities, hosting tea parties with her stuffed animals, and asking questions like why the sky changed colors when people got sad. One Saturday afternoon, Mason found Kennedy in the backyard, kneeling in the dirt with gardening gloves and a determined expression. What are you doing? He asked. Building something, she said, brushing hair from her face. He crouched beside her. With a trowel, with vision, she corrected. I want to grow things here, tomatoes, peppers, maybe some lavender. You ever garden before? No, but I've redesigned a tech interface in 48 hours. I can figure out a sprinkler system. He laughed, brushing soil from her cheek. You're amazing, she kissed him, slow and deep. You're home. By summer, the garden was thriving. The tomatoes clung to their vines like stubborn dreams, and Zoe had adopted a snail family she insisted needed their own neighborhood. On the night of their first wedding anniversary, Mason surprised Kennedy with a candlelit picnic in the backyard. Battery lanterns hung from tree branches. A record player played soft jazz. And on the blanket, beside a basket of her favorite food, was a small black box, sleek, unassuming. Kennedy opened it slowly, revealing a delicate gold bracelet with a single charm, a house key. I wanted you to have something that means what this place is, Mason said. Not the house, us. She fastened it around her wrist, eyes shining. You keep outdoing yourself. I'm just catching up. She leaned into him, her voice barely above a whisper. I used to wonder if I'd ever find someone who saw me not the name, not the company, just me. You're all I see. They lay under the stars, tangled in blankets and each other, while the city hummed quietly in the distance. Years passed, as they always do, but the love didn't fade. It deepened. It rooted itself in the small things, the late-night talks, the shared silences, the way they argued and always came back to each other with more understanding than before. Kennedy's work with the nonprofit grew into a full initiative, and Mason's garage expanded into a second location. Zoe grew taller, bolder, and always carried a sketchpad, designing everything from rocket shoes to underwater libraries. And in the quiet moments between the chaos of life, Kennedy and Mason still danced in the kitchen barefoot, just like that first time. They didn't need the world's approval or headlines to validate their love. They had laughter, they had struggle, they had each other. And that was everything.